And sustainability is something that is important and it's still very important, and people talk about it. There are a lot of activities around it, but it had not been talked about as an industry because no organization has tried to quantify and say what it is, who is part of it. So to do that, and it was the genius of Susie and Nancy to push us to actually identify and create a definition of what is the wellness industry and estimate the size. Catherine?
Sure. So I'll pick it up from there. And just to put a little bit more context on the background that Ophelia gave about, GWI and GWS were the first to, say that wellness is an industry. The only sort of precursor to that we know of is there was a book that came out in 2001, and it was by a man named Paul Zane Pilzer, I think. And the book was called like the Wellness Revolution or the Next $1 Trillion Industry or something. And he did make a prediction then that wellness would become an industry that would surpass healthcare. There was no definition on what it is. I think he put a number on it, but didn't really say how he came up with that. But that's the only person who, conceived of wellness as being an industry before GWI and GWS really started, working on this in depth. So I did want to give a little credit there, but his book was really before its time. The wellness was barely even picking up in 2001, if you remember. I don't think anyone was talking about it very much then. But just moving on to another important impact of the GWI research is, not just defining wellness as an industry, but defining what's within it has been incredibly important because, some people will say, well, wellness is so pervasive now, it's everything, and we do see wellness pervading almost everything we do. But the problem with that thinking is that if wellness is everything, how do we measure it? How do we understand it? How do we see it as a business opportunity? So it was very important for us to figure out what are the subsectors, what are the products and services and activities that come under wellness when we talk about it as an economic activity. And that has to do with definitions. Some of you may have heard Ophelia and me talk about this before, but the definitions are the most important part of the work we do at GWI. We spend probably half of every project just defining things, and we have to do that before we can measure it, because you have to have discipline as an economist in order to put a number on something. What is in the sector, what is out, it makes it concrete. So, the process that we've gone through over the last 10 or so years that we've been working on measuring the wellness economy and studying it is putting those definitions on the 11 sectors that we now have in the industry. And then that allows us to talk about them in terms of business opportunities and size and growth and all of those, numbers that you see that we present at the summit each year.
So the definition and numbers are also important because the quantification brings wellness industry and all these activities into the mainstream. So we said it sounds ridiculous now. Wellness is mainstream, but don't forget, meditation was not mainstream. Talking about psychedelic was not mainstream. Breath work is not mainstream. A lot of things were considered sort of woo-woo, just sort of fringe and had no science behind it and dismissed by medical establishments and by all kinds of people. So to identify the industry in the wellness industry, to call it an industry, to draw business and consumer attention to it, we're also bringing attention of government and research and science behind it, because it's important now. It's a consumer-driven industry because of consumer needs, but it's also driven by business innovation, which sometimes is getting ahead of the science and evidence, right? We all know that. But I think the science and evidence are now really busy catching up because wellness, as we are able to quantify it, is so big and so pervasive. It is really important that every a segment of the society, from government, research, they really, and healthcare industry have to start paying attention to it.
Okay, and then I'll do one last impact, and then I think we're going to do some Q&A and discussion. But the last and maybe the most important impact that we think, or we hope that we have on the economy and on the world and on the industry is really to try to push the wellness industry and businesses and those involved in it into new directions and expanded directions, and to really think about the opportunities in wellness differently. If we go back 10 years in this industry, there was a lot of growth in tourism and spas, and, a lot of the consumer base historically has been in the higher end segments of consumers. We all know that that's been changing, and that's something, sort of a progress that we've really been trying to push as researchers and through our agenda at GWI and through things like this Moonshot, to have an impact on all people around the world who are in desperate need of, the services and the understanding and, wellness mindset that GWI and this group is really trying to push forward. So a couple of the ways that we think that we've made an impact in pushing the industry is first, sort of putting some definition on sectors that were not well understood and were kind of amorphous and being talked about, but nobody really knew what they were. And two of those are, going way back, wellness tourism and also wellness real estate. Those both have grown exponentially in the last decade. When we first started researching wellness tourism, which was around 2012, 2013, nobody knew what it was. A lot of people thought it was medical tourism. And so a lot of work went in at GWI into really putting a clear definition on it so that people in the tourism sector and in wellness could see the vast opportunities that were there for that sector. And it's exploded since then. We all know that. Similarly, wellness real estate. A lot of people have been working in that area in more of a sort of a niche way before we started researching on it. So the research work we've done has really built on what came before us. But, we saw our role as, kind of, again, putting the boundaries around it, developing an understanding of it, expanding the understanding of all of the types of, wellness real estate developments and projects and ideas that can be created in order to meet different consumer needs. So those are a couple of sectors where we really feel like GWI has had an impact in pushing things forward in the industry. And then last, our personal mission and, the mission of the Moonshot and GWI has really been to push the wellness for all idea. And again, really pushing businesses and people in the industry to think about the opportunities that are out there to bring, the things that are needed for all populations, for marginalized populations, lower income, underserved regions, in all places of the world. And so we hope, as we continue our research that, we'll continue to see growth in that area and more impact there. So I think that's what we wanted to say about impact, but we'll toss it back to Nancy and we can have some discussion.
Well, thank you both very, very, very much. And this is now a really great moment, because this is where you get to ask some questions of our esteemed researchers. I'm going to ask you to raise either your real or virtual hand to do that, and to not take more than 30 seconds. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and your question. This is not the time to talk about anything else. We've got limited time with our researchers. Is that Rich Carmona raising his hand? Rich, yes, go ahead. You started off, 30 seconds.
Thank you. Not a question. I want to praise, and I want to say, first of all, I am a groupie for Catherine and Ophelia and the Institute researchers, but I just want our colleagues to realize the unbelievable importance that they have brought to us in defining, first of all, the wellness space globally with data science, and in doing so, giving great credibility to all the efforts at GWI and GWS. So I want to just make sure that they get that credit, because they're behind the scenes all the time, but they are really the engine that drives us, that lets us know what direction to take. So big hugs to all of them.
Thank you, Rich. Couldn't agree more. Bob Dykstra, go ahead.
There has been a lot of conversation on potentially coming up with a better term than wellness. Has there been any more discussion on that?
I think that discussion has been going on ever since we've been working on this research. Wellness has always been kind of a loaded term, and, what it means depends on who you are and where you come from in the world, and, all kinds of factors. There has been the unfortunate trend too that, it's become so pervasive and popular that then you end up with the anti-wellness movement and the wellness bashing in the media. I would say some justified, some not, or sometimes just misconceiving what wellness is. So Susie especially has really pushed us over the years to think about the terminology and again, how we define that terminology. We've talked about it back and forth. And honestly, we're not in charge of which terms people are using. It's you as businesses and the people who are marketing things who are deciding, what you call your offering. And it is true. In some parts of the world, they say well-being. That's a much more common term in Europe, better understood by consumers. Other places use other terminology, and there's a lot of cultural sort of background behind that. So, I don't think that anyone can be the arbiter of, well, we're calling it this now and everybody has to do it that way. It really is very much a grassroots sort of thing. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the wellness term, it's been used so much, it's not perfect, but nobody has really come up, should we replace it with well-being, happiness, or just health? And don't forget, we're just, wellness, and all these are English words. When they're translated, when you're in Asian languages and Arabic, they're completely different. Their words are in between health and wellness and other language. So, we're sticking with wellness for now.
Thank you, guys. Okay, Paul.
Brilliant piece of work, historical. I mean, it's really monumental, and thank you for creating an industry. In terms of quantifying it and how you've done the numbers and the bubbles and that, my question is, there is the quantity that you've developed, but now what about the quality? How do you qualify wellness? And you have the 11 sectors.
Great.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. And so would you speak a bit in terms of the qualifying or the quality of different wellnesses? I know they had the experience with the green industry where they got into greenwashing. Are we going to be getting wellness washing, so to speak? And how can we set standards to that? That's my first question. The second one is, there are now, as of today, 8 billion people on the planet. Now that's going to take some mighty strong strategy, which I think you've started in terms of a moonshot. So we have 8 billion people on the planet now as of today.
Let's go with question 1 and get the researchers involved. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's a very timely question. And of course, it's something we think about all the time because we're economists, and then we're also, our interest is really development, right? Like people's well-being. And so, of course, that $4.5 trillion number, we're talking about spending. A lot of it is private sector spending. Who spend that money? It's just rich people spending a lot of that money, or people spending the money because the healthcare system is not spending the money. There's, and we're talking, we're looking at 220 countries that we're tracking. And so the answer to that in every single country is also different. But I can tell you some of the work we are doing right now, we are doing, because now we actually have wellness industry data in 11 sectors in more than 200 countries. We have a little data stream for just a few years, but we have now completed our data set. And so we are collaborating with the head statistician economist who has been doing all the global happiness report data. And so we are trying to see if there is any kind of correlation between that and the data that the World Happiness Report is tracking, the Gallup data on happiness, and also some of the health metrics, from sort of like quality of life and the quality or health span, health expectancy, those data. And it's not easy working with these kinds of data. And this is the first time, we agree with, our colleague over at the World Happiness Report side that this is going to be some pioneering kind of research. And so we're in process. If we have any findings, we'll let you know. But, everything had to start with data, right? And without data, we can't do anything. So working on it.
Yeah, I think the other part of your question in terms of qualifying, I think you're probably also referring to, well, what qualifies as being part of the wellness industry or true wellness and what is not. People talk about that a lot. It's not our job as the researchers and as GWI to be the sort of certification for, oh, you're in, you're out. There is most certainly an important role for, different types of certifications, perhaps quality seals. That's something that's better done at a country level, on a sector by sector level, because it takes a lot of, rigorous work to determine, what should the standards be for a spa business, for a breath work, provider. Some of that certification takes place at the provider level in terms of, qualifying your professional certifications. There are new certifications out there developing quickly in the wellness real estate space. Those are useful in some ways, not in others. The other thing that qualifies what the industry is doing is scientific research, and that's probably more important than anything else. That, there are a lot of businesses that are peddling and marketing things to consumers that may or may not be effective. Sometimes they're harmful. We can debate all day, the pros and cons of that. It's consumer choice, right? But the evidence in the research base is essential in order to validate, many of these offerings and therapies. And so we would really push for, hopefully more investment in that as a very important way of, making sure what the industry is offering is sound.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Paul, very, very much. We've got time for another question. I'm seeing that if you go to the reactions tab at the bottom of your Zoom window, you have the raise hand option. It's sometimes hard because we're on several screens if you're putting up your real hand, but we have time for another question. Okay. You're up, and it says sales or sales. I'm not sure how to pronounce on your, or are you the salesperson for something? You're muted.
Hi, yeah, I'm actually Darren, but I'm using the company.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for organizing this. I had the privilege of meeting Susie about 3 years ago at a Mind Body conference, and it's amazing, Susie, under your leadership, how this really has come together very, very nicely. It's really impressive. My question kind of relates to sort of what is relevant. I have a plant nursery down in Florida, and we do installations in people's homes for
let's have your question because we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah. So the question is, do you have any data on sort of the amount of budget that the real estate industry is allocating towards biophilic designs and sort of the natural environment inside the real estate development?
Thank you.
We have not tried to measure it at that level of sort of granularity. I mean, I'm sure you've seen our numbers on wellness real estate. Honestly, that is the most challenging sector for us to measure because partly there's so little data available. And, just the numbers and the ability to measure what is real estate activity is really hard. Some people measure it as construction. Some people measure it as real estate sales. Is it resales? Is it only new? What types of projects? So, we put a lot of work in even getting that high level number. I mean, certainly biophilic, design and, installations and approaches we know are, just taking off exponentially. That's a huge segment of wellness real estate, but honestly, I can't tell you, put a dollar figure on it. And even, sometimes it's, is it the labor that's going into it? Is it just purchasing the supplies? Is it the architect's design that incorporates the biophilic elements? I mean, when there's so many pieces that go into even that part of a project, that's what really makes it hard to quantify.
Okay, thank you so much. Susie, I'm going to give you the last word on research, something you might want to say, and then we'll move on.
Whenever the researchers are on, I want to hear from them. So if Catherine and Ophelia maybe can give a little sneak peek about what they're working on now that they are going to share with us. Because, like they were saying, wellness tourism 2012, wellness real estate, they are ahead. They live and breathe this. So I think we should be interested in what are they studying now? So Catherine, Ophelia, can you give us a little hint?
Yes. So this year, our research is slightly different from previous years. We're not measuring the wellness economy size or sectors. We are actually focusing on wellness policy. And you may ask, what is wellness policy? So we have to define that, but certainly the need is there because in every sector and every year we study a different sector and look at the numbers. Like for example, physical activity. We're really looking at not just people spending money on their shoes and on the gym. There is like where the environment where people can they do exercise outdoors? Do they feel safe? Are they living in places where they can actually walk as transportation? I mean, all those things affect our health, right? It's not just how much money you spend. It's a lot of things could be free. if it should be, it's the infrastructure is the environment that is affected by our government and policy and our public investment. So we think it's time to really focus on that. Catherine, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, and one of the conversations we had when we took on this topic is, of course, GWS and GWI are very much an industry and business driven organization. What's the relevance of this to the private sector? It's so important. It's so huge. We're going to be infusing that part of it into the entire report, because the reality is that the government can build things, they do infrastructure and regulations, and they have different functions, but it has been the private sector that has been driving wellness forward and delivers wellness, and the government cannot deliver wellness to the world's population. So we see it very much as being a partnership driven mission, and there are so many ways that businesses can be helped by government, partner with government, be the implementers of wellness for all agendas. And so we really are planning to highlight that in the study. And so we think that this is going to be a completely cross-cutting relevant study, whether you're in business side, consumer, government, across the board. So.
Thank you, Catherine and Ophelia. And I'm very excited about this because it reminds me of when you were doing wellness tourism. Very few people were talking about, they did not realize, and I remember especially hotels, they had no idea if, how is that going to impact them? I feel that that's what's going to happen with this wellness policy research. People don't realize how much momentum we will get because governments are now going to be talking about wellness. It's just going to really galvanize what's already high momentum, especially post-COVID. And I just wanted to mention, Ophelia was saying, well, we're not doing numbers this year. And that brings up one point I wanted to make before I send it back to you, Nancy. We love doing the numbers, the bubble charts. They are so important. But if all Catherine and Ophelia did were the numbers, then we wouldn't get all this rich value from others, introducing wellness policy or wellness physical activity and wellness real estate and so on. So that's why we do the numbers every few years. However, it is my goal to hopefully find a partner who can help us financially to be able to give Catherine and Ophelia some help in terms of some junior analysts who would be able to do the numbers every year, because I would love to see those bubble chart numbers. And I saw it in the chat too. Someone said, what are the latest numbers? I think it's time for our industry to have numbers every year. But for that, we will need, a fairly strong partner to help us so that Catherine and Ophelia can supervise others to do the numbers the way they've set it up, but that we could also move forward in these other sectors. So just saying, if you know someone, get in touch with me, because that's something I'm feeling passionate about. And I just kind of think that we need some help there. And I think someone will step up because it's so important.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you very, very much. And thank you, Catherine and Ophelia. And thank everybody for your thoughtful questions. It was really, really a privilege to have you guys part of the Moonshot call today. So thank you. And speaking of other wonderful thought leaders, it's my pleasure now to introduce Renee Morefield, CEO of Wisdom Works, to tell us about the latest interview she's conducted with the founding president of the Good Food Fund. Renee is a true thought leader, bringing her experience and expertise to major corporations seeking to embed well-being into their company cultures. Renee is a believer in leaders setting the example, and she herself is a well-being leader of the highest calibers. Please welcome Renee Morefield.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's always great to be a part of this conversation that we've been having now for quite a while, and I get the real pleasure of interviewing people each month to talk about wellness leadership and what they're actually doing as part of this growing global network to create a world free of preventable disease. So the interview I did, which Nancy mentioned, was with Jean Ji. I have a hard time pronouncing his name. He is just the embodiment of wellness a wonderful spirit. And if you have a chance to listen to the interview, I think you will adore it and you'll fall in love with him because he was just charming to talk to. He's the founder of the Good Food Fund, which is an organization in China that is bringing together food systems stakeholders in collaborations to make significant change and impact in the food system in China. And now that they are getting some pretty awesome results, they are starting to open the Good Food Fund in other sectors around the world. I think they actually have a Good Food Fund in Michigan and some other places. So watch the interview if you have a chance. I spoke with him because, as Rich mentioned, 7 out of 10 of our diseases that could be prevented we know are partially related to food and our relationship to food. So really understanding what we eat, how we eat, making sure that everyone has access to good food. So really looking at food poverty. These are very challenging issues. As Paul mentioned earlier, 8 billion people on this planet. And food, when you look at the beginning, so our topic was begin, when you look at how do we begin the foundation of our wellness, our vitality, and preventing illness and disease, our relationship to food is so significant. So he had some incredible insights on not only the challenges that we all face and that food systems, the way food systems are institutionalized in such a way that they are sometimes reinforcing choices that support poor health and illness rather than the opposite of what we want. So he had some interesting insights on that. But he was very much not in the mode of shaming or blaming. He was in the mode more of how do we look at what is, and then how do we create a vision for a different future, and what are the possibilities here? One of the possibilities I'll just share with you that's on the interview was he said, we've got a new social influencer when it comes to shifting our relationship with food. We've got a new well-being leader or wellness leader, and those are chefs around the world, that we could really be legitimizing the role of chefs, and more people are wanting to listen to chefs and learn from chefs. So it's an example of a whole new wellness leader that is emerging that we could be kind of paying more attention to and bringing to life. There were 3 mindset shifts I wanted to share with you because I thought they were so interesting that he talked about underlying the whole systemic change in food system and food system disruption. These 3 mindset shifts were important, and I wanted to share them with you because I think they're things that we can also use personally when we're looking at our own food system, when our own grocery shopping, when our own food cultivation in our own life. One of the shifts is that we must understand the limits of our natural resources. He used the supermarket as a metaphor. He said that when he moved to the U.S., he lives in the U.S. now, when he moved to the U.S., his first time in a supermarket, he said he was absolutely overwhelmed at all of the choices. And I could relate. I lived overseas. I lived in another country for about 3 years. And for deodorant and for shampoo and for whatever else, I had one choice, and it made life very easy. And when I moved back to the US, my first breakdown in moving back was going into a supermarket. And I had all these choices and I couldn't figure out what to do. So this supermarket, the idea of walking into a supermarket and having an explosion of choices at your disposal gives us the unconscious sense that resources are limitless, that we can just keep taking and taking and taking and taking and taking. And it's very unconscious. And he said that supermarket as almost a metaphor, if we understand that when we walk in, there was a process of that object or that food getting to the market. There was a whole process. There were people working. There was toiling that was happening. And then there's something somewhere that product needs to go. So just if we started to understand the whole life cycle, we would really understand that there are limits to human and natural resources that we can pay more attention to. The second mindset shift was that we must take personal ownership of our food. Most people, if you ask, and actually so many people around the world are so under-resourced that it might be hard to have the mental and emotional energy to even think about all the things that are happening to food. But for us on this call, who are in very privileged positions in our lives, to start to understand where our food comes from, how animals are treated, how meat is cultivated, how plants are cultivated, what is happening to the food, to be more engaged in those processes and to understand the effects of food in our body, our mind, our emotional being, and to understand where things go, to understand waste reduction, just to really pay more attention to that, all those relationships, and take more ownership was another mindset shift he mentioned. And I thought that was important. And then the third, just as important, is counting our blessings. So it's so easy to take food for granted. I mean, right here, I'm in my kitchen right now doing this call. I could easily just pick an object up, and have my tea, or have an apple, or have an apricot, or we on this call have such easy access to food, but that is not the situation for a lot of people on our planet. So when Catherine mentioned before Wellness for All, how important it is to be conscious of, okay, how can we make food, good food, not just any food, good food, more available for all, is really important. I really encourage you to connect with his work and connect with the Good Food Fund, because they are doing some incredible work, and they really fit the mission that is shifting, or that direction that is shifting for the Wellness Moonshot. Same mission, creating a world free of preventable disease, but with a retooling our direction from just providing resources and science to making measurable impact. The Good Food Fund Institute is right in line with that mission as well. So thank you for letting me share his story. He was very, very inspiring. And the one next month is just as inspiring. I'm about to write that up now.
Renee, thank you so much. Renee is a huge part of the Wellness Moonshot project. She has been for a long time. She gives voice to a lot of the information that you all receive. She does a tremendous job with these interviews, and we're very, very grateful that you're part of this ongoing. So thank you, Renee, and that was very thought-provoking. We will definitely send links. We do a follow-up email to this call. You'll get a link to the recording. You'll get all the questions answered. You'll have the chat where there's information that people have been posting, and we'll be sure to send the link to the interview, so that you all get to see that. So we're going to take a few minutes now and brainstorm together. And we're going to try to answer the question or share some thoughts. And how can we begin to measure the impact of wellness more tangibly? And I would ask that we use the same sort of format. Please raise your virtual hand. I think that's easier. Go into the reactions tab on your Zoom window. Choose raise hand if you want to share a thought. Give us your name, where you're from, and tell us the thought that you would like to share. And this is about how we can have impact and how we can measure that impact. Violetta from Israel, please.
Hi everyone, I'm sorry not to be in a video because I am not in a very good connection now, but I'm very privileged to be here. Just to say two words, that there are two places where we can impact very much, and it's school and workplace, because in those places we have a community of parents and children, and also from employers and employees. So I think if we really want to make this accessible, wellness accessible to everyone, we should permeate and do interventions in those two areas, and sensitize maybe teachers, and start doing much more to educate children since very young age in this kind of interventions to have a better nutrition, to have a better quality of life, and also in the workplace.
Thank you so much. And the Wellness Moonshot was launched with the goal of impacting through the workforces. That was one thing, that one avenue, one channel we thought would be very, very productive, as you've said. And we also have launched the Children's Moonshot, which Jesse mentioned earlier and shared the assets for. So we are trying very hard to get into schools, and we are in a number of schools. Christine Clinton, I don't know if she's on the call, leads the Wellness for Children initiative at the Institute. So we agree with you wholeheartedly, and it's very important to educate children when they're young. Dave Jayshree.
Hi, thanks, Nancy. Calling from London. Very similar vein. We've started to introduce or lobby much more for medical professionals to have it included as part of the training, particularly because we were told that certainly, I think they said when GPs are trained, they have like 6 hours on nutrition, which is just mind-blowing. And so, yeah, I know that a lot of work is being done. I think that sector would be, because I think the majority of people are very much led by white coats being, you know, the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So they could be very good as influencers. And we have got GPs here who are actually very much on the forefront of lobbying for particularly nutrition and specifically well-being. I know a personal GP who recommends meditation instead of writing a script for antidepressants. It's not always needed. So yeah, I think that would be my my point on that one. And thanks for a really great chat conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, and was somewhere, I don't remember if it was the UK or not, that were writing prescriptions for walks in nature. Was that the UK, Susie? Do you remember that?
Well, certain bits of the UK are certainly getting switched on to that. So what they've done now is they've introduced through the NHS in certain areas sort of a 12-week program, which includes losing weight through these various strategies, going out for walks. Yeah.
Thank
And I
you.
think, Nancy, also Japan was you know, but happily we're seeing it more often, even a bit in the US.
Yeah. Okay, we have, it says iPhone de Maria Jose. So please go unmute and go ahead.
Yes, hello. Just trying to follow the idea that the last participant made. I'm an actual cardiac surgeon, and I totally agree with what she said. Be more regarding that in medical community, we are not very much thrown into putting together what happens after we treat a patient. And if we try to come up with something that says how much of the wellness, how much of the well-being, how much of the mindfulness and everything else added up after you treated a patient, you come up with something very positive. And that's something that it hasn't been quantified yet none on any of the branches in the clinical and medical community. And that's something very important.
And where are you calling in from? Where do you practice?
Right now, I've been practicing.
Your connection is not very good. Just tell us where in the world you are.
I'm sorry, I think the connection might be a little bit
difficult. Yeah, the connection's not very good, but maybe put in the chat whatever you were going to finish. That would be great, just so we can keep this moving. But thank you so much. And the medical and wellness community are getting closer together. So Richard Jordan, if you would unmute and we'll go to you.
Yes, thank you, Richard Jordan in Tampa, Florida. Some Episcopal churches have faith community nurses who offer wellness training, for example, on the first Sunday of every month. So houses of worship also. Thank you.
Thank you. very much, a very interesting way to measure. Richard Carmona, for sure you have a thought on measuring the impact of wellness and this idea of the wellness community and the medical community coming together in some way to achieve that.
Well, Nancy, thanks so much. And I think, as you remember in our first conversation years ago, that was one of the questions that drove Susie as well. How do we come together? How do we not compete with one another, but actually become force multipliers and so on? And the issue of looking is very individual, because I recounted discussions back then quickly. If you're looking at sub-Saharan Africa, where water and food is a major problem, measuring an outcome is pretty simple. A little food and water makes them better, there's less disease and so on. Children grow, they thrive. As opposed to if you're living in a wealthy community in the United States, measuring the success, it might be obesity, for instance, because we have obesity in well-to-do communities as well. So we've had these discussions on the complexity, but it probably has to be community by community to be able to decide. And one of the things that Susie drove is, as we democratize this idea of a world free of preventable disease, each community has to look at where that disease is in their community. If you're in a developing nation and don't have good food and water, that's a different issue than if you're in a wealthy nation, and in the middle, the same thing. Find those things where you can make a difference, figure out what the appropriate metrics are, and we start measuring them.
Thank you, Rich.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It is all of a piece, and it is true that the global nature of our organization leads us to really open up this conversation, understand it from a lot of different points of view. For some people, I remember a conversation on workplace wellness. For some people, workplace wellness is just getting home safely. You know, we think of workplace wellness as their air purification. Other people think of it in different ways, and it's very important to keep that conversation global. Maria, please unmute.
Thank you, Nancy. So through my company, we are actually measuring the state of wellness.
Where are you calling in from?
I'm from Guatemala, and we have operations in Mexico, Central America, and potentially going to South America. So basically, we've been working a long time ago, about 5-6 years around, on creating technology that is able to measure the wellness meter. We call it the wellness meter. So every month we make certain questions. So it's a survey, well thought survey, in which the employees actually say how they're feeling in terms of wellness. And we're teaching them to see that it can change among the months. And then we give them tools. Let's say today it's mental health. So you have like mindfulness sessions, you have breathing exercises. If it's emotional, then we talk about psychological support and so on. So it's basically providing them the tool, first to understand how they're feeling. Second, we come up with tools to help them to address it. And then we also give a summary of the recommendations to the company so they could do more actively something about wellness in those sectors.
So you literally measure wellness.
We literally measure, exactly.
Fantastic, and that's through the workforce, which is, you know, something that Renee is very keen on. Renee, any thoughts on measurement? I mean, you work with huge corporations, and you believe in a kind of top-down wellness, well-being leader approach to this. What about measurable impact?
Yeah, I think Maria is onto something. There are a whole host of tools for measuring impact at an employee level. So Gallup would be an example of one of the richest databases for many years, looking at well-being, looking at emotions, looking at physical health, looking at access to healthcare, etc. So that's a tool that's also used globally. And then we actually measure 19 psychometrics of well-being and stress resilience, so lifestyle behavior included, but also looking at other factors of well-being beyond lifestyle, and are starting to see some really incredible results between kind of emotional well-being and physical health and leadership. So I think Nancy, I think to our question for the wellness moonshot of how to measure, I go back to kind of Rich's point, which is for different organizations, different communities, it really does matter what's relevant to that particular community. And one of the things we might be able to do is provide them options for different ways to measure. So that's something that we could be thinking about because it is very unique depending on where you are in the world.
I am going to give Rich, we are out of time for this segment, but you get the last word on this. If you unmute, you're muted. And
Yes, thank you, Nancy. Just a quick comment. I appreciate what Maria, I believe from Guatemala, had said. We must remember, though, as we are trying to connect to the world of 8 billion, of where there are a few million that don't have food and water, and have scarcity, that surveys don't work there because they don't have computers. There's no way to contact them. So it adds another layer of complexity. It shouldn't be a barrier, but we just need to recognize that it's not as easy to extract data from them or inspire them by sending them data because they're struggling on an everyday basis. They don't have the connectivity.
thank you, Rich, and thank you all. So very, very interesting insights. I'm so glad that we did this and that we could gather together. I will say there's one universal thing that we can all do for our wellness, and that is dance. So I'm going to turn it back to Jessie, who will introduce Lisa to take us home.
Thank you, Nancy. So last and certainly not least, we close our program with Lisa Vasulo, founder and director of the Center for Transformative Movement, joining us from Hawaii today. It's very, very early there, 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. now, almost. Her Moonshot in Motion is a practice you can plan into your day to feel more grounded, playful, and open to what's ahead. Lisa, over to you. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so what a wonderful conversation. This has been about more the macro framework of where to begin to think about wellness. We are going to move right into a more micro practice of how we begin our movements. If you think of a cheetah or a panther or a big cat running, when they run, they kind of use their whole body, right? And what we can get into with a very cerebral-oriented modern lifestyle is using our extremities as opposed to our body. So let's stand up. We don't need the music yet. This is a hula inspired practice. And what we're going to do is, let's just reach out for a minute. Reach out your hand. Reach out your hand. Now let's use our elbow and then reach. So elbow, hand, elbow, hand. Now let's take it one more step and begin that motion with our shoulders. So the shoulder goes up, the elbow goes out, and then the hand. And when we come back, let's bring the shoulder, elbow, hand. Let's try that one more time on this side. Shoulder reaches, elbow, hand. Shoulder pulls back, elbow, and down. Good, let's try it once on the other side. Shoulder, elbow, hand. You can reach, shoulder, elbow, hand. So let's take it with the music, Jessie, and we're going to put both hands out on one side, and you can turn up your music a little bit on your own.